Why was she awake when the rest of the base still slept? The North Carolina air clung heavy, damp with humidity, as specialists pushed her third mile along the perimeter of Camp Leo. The watchtowers were still dark. The only sound was her breath, steady, disciplined, cutting through silence like a blade. By the time the bugle would call the others, she was already finishing her stretches, watching the horizon bleed with amber and rose. She always ran alone, not because she wanted to, but because she knew her place here, or at least the place others kept assigning her. In 2 hours, she'd sit in another briefing room, pen poised, eyes sharp, taking notes for missions she'd never be chosen to execute. She would highlight enemy patterns, analyze satellite feeds, predict ambush routes, and then watch someone else live the moment she had prepared for. Someone taller, someone heavier, someone whose uniform carried the unspoken permission to step forward, while hers was expected to remain in the background. At 24, had already proven herself again and again. She spoke 4 languages with fluid grace. She could decode intercepted chatter faster than most machines. She had completed every advanced training course offered within her clearance. Her evaluations, always top 5%. Commendations stacked neatly in her file. Her superiors praised her efficiency, her intellect, her precision. And yet, when the assignments came down, she was invisible. They said it with polite smiles, with soft tones meant to ease the sting. You're invaluable in support. Or worse, the paternal excuse. We can't risk you out there. You're too small, too delicate. Delicate. The word followed her like a shadow. What they never knew was that she had grown up with fists and discipline before she could even spell her own name in English. In Barcelona, her father, a former Spanish Special Forces operator, had put her through drills in their garage-turned dojo. His voice still lived in her memory. The biggest mistake your enemies will make is underestimating you. Their assumptions will always be your sharpest weapon. She could still smell the sweat on the mats. She could still see his knuckles demonstrating throws, locks, strikes. Size, he had told her, was nothing. Technique, will, timing, that was everything. Her father's lessons had been forged for survival, not for sport. And yet, inside the core, they were invisible. No one had ever asked her to demonstrate. No one had ever looked past the frame of her body to see the hours, the scars, the relentless practice. To them, she was a brain in uniform, a fragile asset, a piece of equipment, smart, valuable, but breakable. She carried that weight quietly, but it pressed on her lungs like a stone. Morning formations became rituals of invisibility. She stood at attention, sharp and perfect, but unseen. The intelligence briefings, endless maps and markers, her insights laid out with surgical clarity, only to be absorbed, reworded, claimed by others who walked into the field she was never allowed to touch. Afternoon training left her on the sidelines. If she was there, it was with comms equipment, or practicing medical support, or simulating radio chatter while others sweated through tactical runs. She excelled, of course, because she had to, but excelling in silence is still silence. She tried not to let it harden her, tried to remind herself of cohesion, of trust, of the reasons commanders chose who they did. They need to know you can lift a man under fire, she told herself. They need to know you won't freeze when everything collapses. She understood that. She even respected it. But respect became ash when she realized the cycle she was trapped in. They doubted her because she'd never been tested, and she'd never be tested because they doubted her. It wasn't cruelty. That almost would have been easier. It was the casual dismissal, the unconscious bias, the unexamined assumption that kept her locked behind glass. And then came the breaking point. It was a briefing for Operation Desert Mirage, a multinational exercise with European allies. Complex urban warfare simulations, dozens of moving pieces, exactly the kind of scenario she had trained herself for in private. Colonel Hayes read the team assignments with crisp authority. Alpha Team, reconnaissance. Bravo, assault. Charlie, extraction. names called out like tickets to destiny. Around her, Marines buzzed with excitement, with nerves, with anticipation for the trial ahead. When the intelligence assignments came, she already knew. Specialist, Command Center, Communications Monitoring. The words landed heavy, predictable, suffocating. She scribbled them into her notebook as if they mattered. And then she overheard it. Two voices, careless with volume, as the room emptied. "Thank God they're not putting in the field," muttered Staff Sergeant Williams. "She's brilliant with analysis, sure, but can you imagine? These exercises get physical. Last thing we need is someone slowing the team down." Corporal Johnson chuckled, half-hearted. "She's tough enough. I've seen her grind. But tough doesn't mean combat-ready. Heart doesn't carry a man under fire." Their words stung worse than any bullet, because they weren't cruel. They thought they were reasonable, thought they were protecting the mission, thought they were defining reality. And in a way, they were. That night she sat at her desk long after lights out, pen pressed hard against her journal pages. She wrote everything: the praise, the dismissal, the suffocating cage. She documented each time someone patted her on the back with one hand while quietly pushing her aside with the other. Her entries became promises: one day, one chance, and I'll be ready. Her father's voice echoed again: preparation without opportunity is frustration, but opportunity without preparation, that's tragedy. So she prepared, in silence, in shadow, alone. The base never saw the hours she poured into her hidden training. After duty, after lights, she slipped away to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Jacksonville. Dusty floors, exposed beams, empty except for what she built with her own hands: heavy bags, makeshift mats, ropes, improvised weights. Here she carved herself into someone no file could capture. While others maxed out bench presses, she carried sandbags the weight of a wounded man, again and again, until her shoulders burned. She climbed ropes with weighted vests until her fingers bled. She practiced joint locks on dummies, takedowns against shadows, pressure strikes against bags that never hit back. Every move was drilled, recorded, studied. She wrote it all down. Progress, failures, breakthroughs. She was building proof even if no one would ever read it. And still she felt the loneliness of it. To live two lives, the obedient analyst by day, the hidden warrior by night. To smile when they told her she was valuable in her role, when inside she wanted to scream. She told no one except her father in coded phone calls. He would ask about old drills or garage routines, and she would answer in careful phrases, knowing others might be listening. And always his words returned to her like an anchor: "There are no fair fights. Make every fight unfair in your favor." But unfair required opportunity, and opportunity did not come. Not yet. That Tuesday evening, while she sat alone in the far corner of the mess hall, finishing terrain analyses no one else would bother to review, she heard it. Voices she wished she could hear. Drill Sergeant Stone. His baritone was gravel, heavy from years of command, and his words cut deeper than any blade. "This integration nonsense will get people killed," he was saying. "They keep putting people where they don't belong and act surprised when missions go sideways." Staff Sergeant Williams was with him, the same Williams she had overheard before. "'S tricky," Williams said cautiously. "She's brilliant with analysis, her languages, her intel valuable." "In support," Stone interrupted, fork stabbing at his plate. "That's it. Because mark my words, one of these days some officer's going to decide she needs field experience, and then we'll all pay the price." Froze, pen still in her hand, unmoving. She didn't dare shift, didn't dare draw attention. Williams tried again. "She's not that small, Sergeant, decent shape for her size." Stone laughed, a sound like disdain made flesh. "Decent for her size, that's the problem. Combat doesn't grade on a curve. You either carry a Marine under fire or you don't. She's what, 130 pounds soaking wet. She wouldn't make it 50 yards. The words hit like body shots, each one sharper because she knew he had never once watched her train, never once tested her strength. His opinion was built on nothing but sight, on assumptions. And his voice carried weight. His words shaped careers. His doubts became doors locked shut. She wanted to stand, to slam her notebook closed, to demand he test her right then and there. But instead she stayed silent, letting his words carve themselves into her bones. Because silence, too, is a kind of preparation. She realized something in that moment, something that sent a chill down her spine. He wasn't just dismissing her, he was shaping her future. Unless she broke him first. What did it cost her to live two lives? By day, she was the specialist with the sharp eyes and sharper notes, the one everyone trusted to monitor comms, to crunch numbers, to translate chatter into warnings and predictions. By night, she was something else entirely, a fighter no one believed existed, training in a forgotten warehouse while the rest of the base slept. The warehouse had become her sanctuary, empty concrete, exposed steel beams, broken windows bleeding moonlight across the floor. It smelled of dust, rust, and sweat she had poured into it night after night. Here the real work began. Weighted pulls until her arms trembled. Farmers' walks with sandbags to simulate dragging a wounded comrade under fire. Rope climbs until her palms blistered raw. And when her body was too exhausted to move, she'd kneel in front of her training journals, documenting every drill, every weakness, every inch of progress. Her father had told her once, the dojo isn't a place, it's a state of mind. Wherever you push past your limits, that's the dojo. So she built hers with scraps and silence. No one knew, no one could know. If they did, they'd dismiss it as fantasy or worse, as delusion. She thinks she's special. She thinks she can fight. They would twist preparation into arrogance. So she trained in secret. The combat portion of her regimen was drawn from everywhere. Brazilian, Maga, Spanish stick fighting. Techniques her father had drilled into her bones. Every move designed for one purpose, survival. Size didn't matter when you controlled joints, when you broke balance, when you ended fights before they began. And yet it wasn't just about fists. She trained her mind, too, studied psychology, learned to read tension in shoulders, hesitation in footsteps, the twitch of hands that revealed intention before words were spoken. She practiced confidence, the subtle kind, the kind that deterred violence before it started. Every movement, every drill, every page in her journal whispered the same truth. She was ready for a fight she wasn't allowed to have. But living two lives wears at the soul. In daylight, she bit her tongue as others made decisions she could have made faster, sharper. She sat in briefings where her insights were cherry-picked and handed off to field teams who would get the credit she never could. She smiled when praised, though inside she wanted to shout, "Let me prove it. Let me try." She had become an actress, the dutiful specialist who nodded, who saluted, who thanked them for keeping her safe. And then, when the night swallowed the base, she stripped that mask away and became who she really was. But masks have a way of slipping. It started small. A gunnery sergeant inspecting barracks stumbled across gear that shouldn't have been in her footlocker. A carbon fiber descender, tactical climbing harnesses, equipment far beyond what an intelligence specialist needed. The sergeant had said, holding the gear like evidence, "Explain this." Her throat had gone dry, but her answer was ready. "Personal training, Sergeant. Emergency preparedness." The sergeant's eyes had narrowed. She wasn't convinced. The equipment wasn't cheap, wasn't recreational. It was professional grade. The kind of thing reserved for search and rescue, not analysts sitting behind screens. Preparedness for what? The sergeant pressed. Had given the safest answer she could. Our environment is unpredictable. I wanted to ensure readiness if circumstances demanded. The words sounded good, but they landed wrong. They suggested something more dangerous, criticism of standard training, as if she were saying the core wasn't enough. Word spread faster than she imagined. Stone seized it. Of course he did. By the next morning he was mocking her in meetings. Looks like thinks she's special ops, buying herself gear because the Corps isn't good enough. Maybe someone should remind her what her job actually is, computers and radios, not mountain rescues. His laugh had been cruel, loud enough for others to hear, and his words carried. Whispers followed her now, in chow lines, in gyms, in corridors. What's she really training for? She's obsessed. She thinks she's going to be the next Rambo. Even Captain, the officer who had once supported her, called her in. His desk was spread with her file, her commendations stacked neatly beside the concerns others had raised. He said carefully, "You're one of the finest analysts in this unit, but I have to ask, what's driving this?" She held herself still, her hands folded. "Sir, my performance has never slipped. My record stands." "That's not in question." His tone softened, but his eyes were troubled. "The concern is scope, priorities. You're training outside your specialty, buying equipment, studying materials above your clearance. Some people wonder if you're losing focus." She wanted to scream. Instead, she kept her voice measured. "Sir, how can anyone know what's required until the moment comes? Isn't preparation a duty, not a distraction?" He sighed. "That's why we have programs, pathways. You advance when the system says you're ready. Anything else looks reckless." And there it was again. The circle, opportunities because she lacked experience, lacking experience because she was opportunities. The trap had teeth, and it was closing. It grew worse when Stone decided to push further. He led an inspection of her quarters, officially for compliance, but everyone knew what he was hunting for, and he found it. Her journals, page after page of detailed notes, joint locks, strike patterns, throw diagrams, conditioning regimens. He flipped through them like a prosecutor building his case. "Look at this," he sneered. "An intelligence specialist writing manuals on combat, advanced techniques, fantasy scenarios. What is this?" "Physical training, Sergeant," she answered, her voice steady though her pulse hammered. "Self-defense, encouraged for all Marines." His laugh was sharp, cruel. "Self-defense. This looks like you think you're going to win wars single-handedly. This is obsession, delusion. You need counseling, not combat assignments." That recommendation went into her record. The whispers sharpened into stares. Now she wasn't just overlooked, she was suspect. But suspicion can be fuel. Every doubt, every whisper, every dismissal, they layered on her shoulders until she almost buckled under them. Almost, but not quite. Because beneath the weight, a resolve hardened. She knew what Stone didn't. She knew the hours, the bruises, the discipline. She knew she wasn't chasing fantasies. She was preparing for something inevitable. And when that moment came, it would not be hidden in journals. It would not be doubted. It would not be ignored. It would happen in the open, in front of eyes that could not look away. And it would shatter everything. What happens when silence runs out of places to hide? For months had survived on patience, on the idea that preparation without opportunity was still worthwhile, that maybe one day someone would notice, that maybe competence would speak louder than appearances. But opportunity never arrives politely. Sometimes it crashes in like a storm, violent and sudden, leaving no chance to rehearse. That storm came on a Friday. The training field had been transformed into an arena. Nearly 300 Marines, lined in tight formation, ringed the combat mats at the center. Visitors from Spain, France, and the United Kingdom filled the bleachers, foreign uniforms stiff in the Carolina heat, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Flags stirred in the breeze above them, snapping in rhythm with the hum of anticipation. This wasn't just a training exercise, it was theater, a showcase of American Marines before allies who measured, compared, judged. Every move here mattered beyond reputation. It mattered for diplomacy, for pride. Drill Sergeant Stone relished the stage. 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle and swagger. His presence radiated authority, sharpened by years of commanding rooms and crushing doubts before they even surfaced. He wore his confidence like armor, and his smirk was a weapon of its own. He began with a lecture, loud, dismissive. "American Marines," he declared, packing across the mats, "don't waste time with fancy tricks. We win fights with strength, with conditioning, with aggression. Real combat doesn't reward theory, it rewards dominance." Every word was calculated, a jab at European methods he considered soft, a jab, too, at people like her. Stood at the edge of the field, headset in hand, tasked with monitoring comms for the demonstration. She wasn't supposed to be part of the show, just another shadow on the sidelines. But as Stone spoke, she felt every syllable like a blade pressed against her ribs. She had heard this philosophy before: power over technique, muscle over mind. It was the creed that had kept her caged. And then came the spark. A Spanish officer, Colonel Martinez, raised his hand. Compact, weathered, a man who had seen war and survived it. "Sergeant," he said evenly, his accent clear but his English precise, "your Marines are strong, no doubt. But what of those who are not giants? Do your methods account for smaller operators, for those who must rely on skill rather than size?" The question was polite, but it cut to the bone. Stone's jaw tightened. "Colonel, combat doesn't bend to politics. You meet the standard or you don't. Those who can't keep up find their place in support roles where they belong." A ripple moved through the crowd. Tension thickened like smoke. Martinez pressed, his expression calm. "In Spain, we have men smaller than me who have toppled enemies twice their weight, not with brute force, with leverage, with timing. Surely the Corps recognizes such possibilities." Stone's face flushed red, his voice rising. "Colonel, with respect, American Marines don't need to compromise. We've proven our effectiveness in every war that mattered. We don't train for exceptions. We train to win." The words stung ears, not just because they were arrogant, but because they erased people like her entirely. The crowd murmured. Some Marines shifted uneasy. Others smirked, nodding along with Stone's bravado. Martinez didn't flinch. "Perhaps then, Sergeant, you might demonstrate, show us the proof." And just like that, the air changed. Stone's eyes gleamed. A challenge. A chance to prove dominance not just with words but with action. He welcomed it. The mats became a battlefield. Martinez stepped forward, small but composed, his movements precise. Stone squared his shoulders, rolling them back, flexing his size like a weapon. The fight began. It didn't last long. Stone charged, power in every step, but Martinez flowed around him like water. A pivot here, a twist there. His timing was perfect, his economy brutal. And then, with a sudden shift, he caught Stone's momentum and threw him hard. The sergeant slammed into the mat, breath ripped from his lungs. Gasps echoed across the field. 300 Marines stood frozen. Stone scrambled up, face burning, but the truth was written across the ground. Brute force had just failed. Martinez, dignified, offered a hand to help him up. Stone refused it. His chest tightened. She could hardly breathe. She had just witnessed what she had always known: strength alone wasn't enough. Technique mattered. Preparation mattered. Her father's lessons had just been proven on an international stage. But Stone's humiliation was raw, bleeding, and desperate for a bandage. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for someone weaker, someone easier to crush. And then he saw her. His voice boomed, sharp as a rifle crack. "Since you're so interested in training outside your lane, why don't you step up? Show us what all that special preparation of yours amounts to." Every head turned. Her pulse spiked. Heat rushed to her face. For a moment she stood frozen, headset still clutched in her hand. This wasn't supposed to happen, not like this. 300 Marines, foreign officers, her superiors, every eye waiting to see if she would step forward or shrink. Her mind flashed to her journals, to the whispers, to Stone's mocking voice in the mess hall. She can't carry a man under fire. She's decent for her size. She thought of her father's words, make every fight unfair in your favor. Her breath steadied. She placed the headset down, slowly, deliberately, and stepped onto the mat. The silence was deafening. Stone's smirk returned, vicious now, sharpened by wounded pride. He was going to make her his example, crush her to prove that Martinez's victory had been a fluke, that strength was still king. His heart pounded so hard she thought the crowd might hear it, but her face was calm, her stance measured. This was it. The moment she had been preparing for in secret, in shadows, in silence. Opportunity had come, and it demanded blood or dignity. How do you stand when the whole world expects you to fall? Felt the weight of 300 stares pressing down on her as she stepped onto the mat. The ground seemed thinner beneath her boots, like it might give way. Her throat tightened, but her jaw locked hard. She couldn't afford tremors. Not here. Stone towered before her, grinning like a predator. His confidence filled the space between them, swollen and poisonous. He cracked his knuckles slow, deliberate for the crowd to hear. Each pop was a threat. "Careful now," he said, loud enough for every Marine to catch. "Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." Laughter rippled through the ranks, nervous, cruel, expectant. Didn't answer. Silence was sharper than any retort. Instead, she let her body slide into the stance her father had drilled into her since she was 10. Feet grounded, knees soft, shoulders relaxed but every muscle ready to coil. To the untrained eye, it looked casual. To anyone who knew, it was a coiled spring. Stone mistook it for hesitation. He smirked, ready. She gave the smallest nod. The colonel overseeing the demonstration lifted his hand, hesitated, perhaps questioning the wisdom of letting this proceed, then dropped it. The fight began. Stone lunged first, exactly as she knew he would. A burst of raw power, his right arm sweeping for a collar grab, aiming to control her head, to slam her down in one brutal motion. But power moves broadcast themselves. She saw the shoulder twitch a fraction too early, felt the air shift as his weight barreled forward. She pivoted smooth, precise like water. His hand cut empty air. His body stumbled through the space she'd vacated. Gasps rippled through the formation. Stone growled, recovering, spinning back. His grin faltered but didn't vanish. "Slippery," he muttered. His pulse hammered in her ears, but her breath stayed steady. One dodge didn't prove anything. He would come harder, faster. And he did. This time it was a double-hand shove, pure force meant to overwhelm her guard. She let him close, let him commit, and then twisted, guiding his arms past her with nothing but a redirecting palm. His momentum betrayed him again, carrying him off balance. She tapped his ribs with the edge of her hand, not enough to injure, just enough to say, "I could." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some jeering, most stunned silent. Stone's face darkened, the smirk vanished. This wasn't funny anymore. "Cute," he spat, "but let's see what happens when I stop playing." His stance dropped, heavier now, his weight distributed like a man ready to crush. His eyes narrowed, his movements sharper. He was done underestimating her. His chest tightened. This was the danger zone. A joke fight had just become serious, and serious could turn deadly. But fear wasn't new to her. She had trained with fear wrapped around her like a second skin. The warehouse hadn't just been about muscle. It had been about teaching herself to breathe when terror threatened to strangle her. Stay calm, stay small, stay sharp. Stone charged again, feinting high before dropping low, his shoulder ramming toward her stomach. A textbook takedown attempt. She didn't resist the force, she redirected it. At the last second, she shifted her hips, catching his arm, guiding his shoulder past her center line. Her legs tangled with his, a trip disguised as a retreat. and the giant hit the mat. The sound cracked through the field like thunder. 300 Marines erupted, shouts, gasps, disbelief. Stone scrambled up, face red with rage, humiliation blooming like fire. He bared his teeth, spittle flying. "Lucky shot," he barked. "Do it again." Didn't move, didn't taunt, didn't even smirk. She simply reset her stance. Calm, silent. That silence infuriated him more than any words could. He came at her with raw fury now, punches wild, heavy arcs meant to crush bone. Each swing whooshed past her as she slipped, ducked, weaved. Not flashy, not fancy, just efficient. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Conserve energy. Let the storm exhaust itself. And Stone was a storm, furious, sloppy, burning through himself with every miss. She waited, patient, focused, until the moment came. A left hook too wide, his ribs exposed, his balance uneven. She stepped in, precise, sharp. Her elbow drove into the exposed ribs, not hard enough to break but enough to shock, to make him stumble. The crowd howled. Marines who had doubted her were now leaning forward, eyes wide, shouting her name. Others stood frozen, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Stone staggered, clutching his side, eyes wild with disbelief. His voice cracked with fury. "You think you can embarrass me?" His chest rose and fell steady. Her hand stayed up. Her stance remained unbroken. She said nothing. Because this wasn't about embarrassment. It was about truth. And the truth was now undeniable. She wasn't prey. She was the storm's end. How long can a man pretend strength is enough before the truth breaks him? Stone's chest heaved as he circled her, sweat dripping down his temple, his jaw tight with rage. He had not expected this. Not here. Not in front of them. 300 Marines, foreign officers, the command staff, and all of them had just watched him fall. He needed to reclaim dominance, to erase the shame. Saw it in his eyes, the desperation beneath the fury. She had studied that look for years in sparring partners, in aggressors her father once taught her to disarm. Rage wasn't power. Rage was a crack in armor. Rage made men reckless. Still, it terrified her. Because reckless men were dangerous. He lunged again, faster this time, closing distance with a soldier's precision. His hand shot for her collar, his other arm locking behind. A move meant to control her head, slam her down, grind her face into the mat until her spirit broke. She let the grab happen. The crowd gasped, thinking she'd lost, but this was where the training lived. Her hips shifted, her body rotated, and in an instant she was no longer under his weight but beside him, twisting, guiding his wrist against its own joint. The pain registered in his grunt, his balance faltered. She didn't finish the lock, she released. Because this wasn't war, this was still a demonstration. But her mercy was a mistake. Stone snarled, ripping free, his face twisted with humiliation. He swung again, a wild backhand that cut the air inches from her cheek. Shouts rose from the crowd. Some were cheering, some were pleading to stop it, but no one moved to intervene. This was spectacle now, a test. His lungs burned with adrenaline, but her mind stayed clear. Don't meet him with strength, meet him with truth. He rushed again. She dropped low, pivoted, swept his leg. His body slammed against the mat with a thunder that rattled teeth. The formation erupted in disbelief. Stone roared back up, fury consuming him. He wasn't thinking of technique anymore. He wasn't thinking at all. He charged like a bull, blind with rage, hands clawing for anything to hold, to crush, to silence. She moved, precise, ruthless. Her body flowed where his broke. A parry, a pivot, his wrist in her grip. Her body spun under his arm, his shoulder wrenched back. And suddenly he was trapped. The joint lock was perfect. Textbook. A lifetime of training snapping into existence in one breath. His arm bent the wrong way. His face contorted, red, teeth bared in pain. He dropped to one knee, The sergeant's roar cut short by the pressure tearing through his shoulder. Gasps tore through the formation. She had him, but now the choice clawed at her chest. End it or let him go. Every muscle in her body screamed to release, to show restraint, to prove she was not the monster he wanted them to believe. But then she saw his eyes. Even kneeling, even caught, they burned with hatred, with denial, with the promise that if she let go, he would come again. This wasn't about the fight anymore. It was about erasure, about whether she would be erased again or finally seen. Her father's voice came back like thunder. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it acts. She tightened the lock. A snap split the air. Stone's scream echoed across the field. And then silence. 300 Marines stood frozen. Foreign officers stiffened in disbelief. No one moved. No one breathed. The man who had mocked her, doubted her, dismissed her. The man who had tried to break her in front of the world was on his knees, arms shattered, face contorted in agony. And she was still standing. Unshaken, silent, unbroken. What sound is heavier, the snap of a joint or the silence that follows? For a long moment, the entire training field was frozen. 300 Marines stood locked in formation, as if afraid to move, as if the air itself might shatter if they breathed too loudly. The visiting officers leaned forward in their seats, expressions unreadable, every crease of their uniform stiff with disbelief. And at the center of it all, Sergeant Stone knelt on the mat, clutching his ruined shoulder, teeth bared in agony. Stood above him, motionless, silent, her chest rising steady despite the storm inside. The silence broke in fragments. A ripple of whispers, a sharp gasp, then voices rising, colliding, spreading through the ranks like wildfire. Holy, she dropped him. Did you see that lock? She broke the sergeant. No way, that just happened. The noise grew until it became a roar. Some Marines shouted her name, others just hollered disbelief, others stood pale, not sure whether to cheer or fear. But the commanders weren't silent. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, his jaw rigid. Corpsman, get him off the mat. 2 medics rushed in, carefully maneuvering Stone, his face twisted with humiliation and pain. He cursed under his breath, spitting fury, but the sound was broken, stripped of the authority it once carried. The sight twisted something inside her. She hadn't wanted this, not like this, to prove herself at his expense, to see him humiliated in front of his own Marines. And yet, hadn't this been inevitable? He had chosen her. He had called her out. He had made the fight public. She had simply refused to lose. Still, her stomach churned. The colonel turned his gaze on her, cold, assessing, his expression unreadable. Specialist, he said, voice carrying across the field. Stand down. She saluted, sharp, perfect, but her hands trembled as she lowered them. The formation was dismissed soon after, but dismissal didn't end the noise. As the Marines dispersed, they carried the story on their shoulders, retelling it in fragments, replaying the fight with words and gestures. Some treated it like legend, others like scandal. But all of them repeated the same truth. She had shattered the sergeant. By the time she returned to her barracks, the whispers had grown into waves. Heads turned as she passed, some with admiration, some with resentment, some with fear. And inside her chest, 2 truths warred against each other. Pride, for proving herself, for surviving the test she had waited years to face, for standing in front of 289 Marines and refusing to be erased. And dread for what would follow, because the Corps was not kind to disruptions. That night she sat alone at her desk, her journal open but her pen unmoving. Her mind replayed the moment on an endless loop. The lock, the snap, his scream, the silence. She told herself she hadn't had a choice, that he had forced it. That restraint would have only prolonged the fight until someone got hurt worse. That her action had been decisive, clean, controlled. But another voice whispered, you wanted it. You wanted him to see. You wanted them all to see. She closed her eyes. The whisper wasn't wrong. Hours later, the knock came. She rose to find Captain at the door. His face was grave. Colonel Hayes wants you in his office, now. The walk across base felt longer than any ruck march. Every Marine she passed turned to watch. Some nodded with respect. Others smirked with resentment. A few saluted not formally but in quiet acknowledgement. When she entered Hayes's office, the air was heavy. The colonel sat behind his desk, hands folded, eyes piercing. Captain stood at his side. Martinez, the Spanish officer who had sparked the demonstration, was also present, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Specialist, Hayes began, his voice like stone. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done today? Her throat tightened. She forced her voice steady. Sir, I responded to a direct challenge. I defended myself within training protocol. Hayes's gaze sharpened. You shattered a senior NCO's shoulder, before 300 Marines, before foreign officers. Do you think this will be ignored? Her chest clenched. Sir, with respect, he escalated. He attacked with intent. I acted in defense. I controlled the fight until there was no choice. His voice cut in softer. She's right. Stone went too far. Everyone saw it. This wasn't sparring anymore. It became real. Hayes exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. And the optics, Captain. What about the fact that one of my analysts just humiliated a sergeant in front of allies? What about the fact that whispers are already spreading across the Corps? Martinez finally spoke. His accent gave the words weight. Colonel, forgive me, but what I witnessed today was not humiliation. It was truth. She proved what I argued. Size is not strength. Technique is strength. She gave your Marines a lesson they will not forget. Silence followed, heavy, unyielding. Hayes leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, Go back to your quarters, await orders. Dismissed. The walk back was heavier than the one before. In her barracks, she sat on her bunk, staring at the floor. Around her, the whispers continued, but inside there was only silence. She had won, and yet it didn't feel like victory. Because victories in the Corps came with recognition, with medals, with promotion. This was something else. This was a fracture, not just of a joint, but of the balance she had lived under. She had broken the silence. And now the consequences would come. What weighs heavier on a soldier, the battle itself, or the trial that follows it? Barely slept the night after the fight. Every time her eyes closed, she saw it again, the twist, the lock, the scream, the silence. Her body lay still in her bunk, but her mind kept replaying the moment, as if by watching it enough times she might rewrite it. By dawn, the summons arrived. The inquiry convened in a sterile room inside headquarters. No sunlight, just fluorescent hums and polished wood. At the table sat Colonel Hayes, captain, the legal officer, and 2 observers from Allied commands. Martinez was there too, his presence a quiet anchor, though his face gave nothing away. Stood at attention as the proceedings began. Specialist, the legal officer started, his tone clipped. You are under review for conduct unbecoming, excessive force during a training exercise, and insubordination in escalating a demonstration into violence. Do you understand the charges? Her chest tightened, she forced her voice steady. Yes, sir. Hayes's eyes drilled into her. This is not a court-martial, but the implications are serious. Your future in this Corps hangs in the balance. Now, explain yourself. Swallowed, her palms were damp inside clenched fists. Sir, I responded to a direct challenge. I did not initiate. Sergeant Stone engaged with full force. I attempted restraint. When restraint failed, I acted to end the confrontation swiftly. My actions were defensive, not malicious. The legal officer leaned forward. Defensive. You dislocated, possibly fractured, a senior NCO's shoulder. That goes far beyond defense. Before she could respond, Martinez spoke. His calm voice cut through the tension. With respect, I watched the fight closely. Specialist released holds more than once. She showed restraint until forced otherwise. If she had not controlled the fight decisively, it could have spiraled further and worse. Added, "Sir, you know Stone. He wasn't going to stop. If had yielded, it wouldn't have ended. We'd be sitting here with her in a hospital bed instead." The room went still. Hayes's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. He knew they weren't wrong. The legal officer exhaled sharply, flipping through her file. "Specialist, your record shows commendations, high evaluations, and no history of misconduct. But it also shows extracurricular activities, unauthorized training, equipment not issued, journals detailing advanced combat methods. Some would call this preparation. Others would call it obsession." The words stung sharper than she expected. She lifted her chin. "Sir, if I prepared beyond my lane, it was not to defy the Corps. It was to be ready when the Corps demanded more of me. Yesterday it demanded. I was ready." Her voice wavered only at the end. Silence followed, heavy, the kind of silence that swallows rooms whole. Finally Hayes spoke. His tone was iron. "Specialist, here is the truth. You embarrassed a senior NCO. You disrupted a demonstration in front of allies. You shattered not just a joint but the image of control we must project. Some want you punished harshly, stripped of duty, sent home." Her stomach dropped. But then he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, others argue you proved something undeniable. That skill, preparation, and resilience matter more than size or swagger. That perhaps we've overlooked talent because of bias. That maybe, just maybe, you showed the Corps its blind spot." The words hung like smoke. Her pulse hammered. Hayes leaned back. "I haven't decided yet. You'll remain confined to quarters until further notice. Dismissed." She saluted, pivoted, and left, her legs steady, though inside she was crumbling. Outside, the whispers were louder than ever. Marines clustered in corners, talking fast, their eyes cutting toward her as she passed, some with awe, some with scorn. "Could take half the platoon, I swear." She embarrassed Stone. "He'll never live it down." "Don't get too close, she's dangerous." Dangerous, she saved face for all of us. Stone made us look like fools. She proved we're better than that. Respect and resentment, woven into the same breath. She became both ghost and legend overnight. Marines who had ignored her for years now stared openly. Some nodded in respect. Others crossed their arms, unwilling to yield pride. A few even smirked as if daring her to try them next. The isolation deepened. At meals she sat alone, though the tables around her buzzed with her name. In the gym, men watched her lifts with measuring eyes as if to confirm what they had seen. At night, she lay awake, torn between pride and dread. Was this what she wanted, to be seen, to be recognized? Yes, but not like this. Not as a disruption, not as a symbol. She wanted to be a Marine, simply that, equal, nothing more, nothing less. And now she wasn't sure she ever could be. Days passed. The inquiry dragged. Stone remained on medical leave, his fury leaking through the ranks in whispers. Some said he swore he'd never forgive her. Others said he was already pulling strings, calling in favors, demanding she be discharged. The weight pressed heavier each day. One evening, as she sat in the mess hall, pushing cold food across her tray, a voice broke through the noise. She looked up. Corporal Johnson, the same man who had once doubted her in whispers, now stood stiff, his expression uncertain. "I saw what you did," he said quietly, "and I was wrong." Her chest tightened. She didn't answer. He cleared his throat, glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Just know, not all of us think you're a problem. Some of us think you showed what we needed to see." And then he walked away, leaving her staring at the untouched food. The words were small, but they cracked something open inside her. Because for the first time, someone inside the ranks had admitted it. She wasn't just tolerated, she was respected. Still, respect was dangerous, because respect could spread. And if it spread too far, the core itself might have to change. What is justice in a world built on rank and silence? 2 weeks after the fight, the verdict came. Not with ceremony, not with fanfare. Just a folded paper slipped under her door, the words typed with military precision. Specialist disciplinary review complete. Formal reprimand issued for conduct unbecoming. No reduction in rank. No discharge. Assigned to remain in intelligence support pending reassessment in 6 months. That was it. No medals. No promotions. No applause. Just a reprimand, a scar on her record, and the quiet assurance she would remain where she had always been. Behind screens, behind data, behind others. She stared at the paper for a long time. Relief and disappointment twisted inside her like a double helix. Relief she wasn't sent home. Relief her career wasn't ended. But disappointment, sharp, bitter, that even after everything, the system still refused to see her. And yet something had changed. The next day in the briefing room, no one ignored her when she spoke. Heads turned. Eyes listened. Marines who once brushed her off now weighed her words with care. They didn't say it aloud, but the truth was carved into their silence. They had seen her stand against stone. They had seen her hold her ground when none expected her to. That memory wouldn't fade, no matter what the paperwork said. Respect wasn't written in files, it was written in eyes. Still, it was a lonely kind of respect. She ate her meals alone. She trained alone. She wrote in her journals alone. But now when she walked into a room, voices paused. When she entered the gym, space cleared around her. When she passed in corridors, shoulders squared a little. They didn't invite her in, but they couldn't erase her anymore. And that was something. At night she wrestled with the memory, not of the snap, though that sound still haunted her dreams, but of the moment before. The split-second choice, to release or to finish. She had chosen to finish. Part of her was proud, part of her was ashamed. Both parts lived side by side, refusing to let the other go. One evening, as the sun bled across the Carolina horizon, she sat outside the warehouse where she still trained in secret. The air smelled of dust and salt. Her hands were wrapped, knuckles bruised from the heavy bag. She opened her journal, wrote slowly, carefully, as if the words themselves might break if pressed too hard. Today they looked at me differently, not as fragile, not as invisible, but not as equal either. Something in between, a symbol, a warning, a story they'll tell in whispers. Maybe that's enough, maybe not, but I know this: I will not be erased again. Not by stone, not by silence, not by anyone. Her pen paused. She thought of her father, of the long nights in the garage, the mats stained with sweat, his voice steady as he drilled her again and again. There are no fair fights, make every fight unfair in your favor. She realized now what he had meant, not just about combat, but about life, about how the world tilted unfair always, and how survival meant refusing to play by its rules. Days bled into weeks. The whispers didn't fade. If anything, they grew, stories warped with retelling. Some claimed she had thrown stone across the mat like a. Others said she'd broken his arm in 3 places. The myth grew larger than the truth. But she knew the truth was enough. Because the truth had changed something. Martinez sought her out before he returned to Spain. He shook her hand firmly, his eyes steady. "What you did was necessary," he said. "Your corps may punish you for it, but in time they'll thank you." She didn't know how to answer. She only nodded, the weight of his words settling into her chest. Two stopped her one evening after a briefing. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "You may never get the credit you deserve, but understand this: what you showed us matters, more than you realize." Again she could only nod. Words felt too fragile. And then, one night in the mess hall, a Marine she barely knew, a private, younger, wide-eyed, approached her table. He stood stiff, nervous, then said, "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for showing us it's possible." He didn't stay for her reply. He just walked away, leaving her staring at her tray, her chest tight. That, more than anything, stayed with her. Not the reprimand, not the whispers, not even Stone's broken pride. But the fact that one young Marine now believed something he hadn't before, that maybe others did too. And in that quiet she realized something. Change doesn't come with medals, or promotions, or clean victories. It comes with cracks, small breaks in the silence, small proofs that what was once unthinkable can be real. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a cautionary tale. She was just a Marine who refused to be erased. And maybe that was enough. As she closed her journal that night, her final words on the page were simple. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.